Alors bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue pour ces 2 jours de colloque. Déjà peut-être pour vous dire combien c'est important pour l'école et pour nos étudiants et nos étudiants-chercheurs. La reprise, je le dis en ce moment assez souvent par rapport à tout ce qui s'est passé ces derniers mois, de pouvoir à nouveau se retrouver, se rencontrer et travailler ensemble. Donc bienvenue pour ce colloque, bienvenue messieurs, je vous présenterai très rapidement dans cette très courte introduction. Colloque, donc Contradiction, antagonisme et négativité. Quand j'ai lu ce titre, je me suis dit, je ne suis pas philosophe, je suis plutôt historienne de l'art, mais je me suis dit, au fond, on pourrait presque dire qu'une école d'art, c'est un endroit de la contradiction, c'est un endroit des antagonismes et de la négativité. C'est-à-dire qu'au fond, ça serait presque parfois un sous-titre de ce que sont nos écoles. Et nos écoles d'art, je parle pourquoi de cela, parce que précisément, il me semble, et je le dis, je ne me prétends absolument pas scientifique sur ce sujet, mais je pense que la question de l'art, la question d'une pratique artistique, la question du regard que l'on porte sur une œuvre, ou sur les œuvres, et puisque nous sommes dans une école d'art, nous parlons d'œuvres d'art, dans toute leur diversité, dans toute leur contradiction aussi, et dans tout ce qui, à un moment, fait que des regards se croisent, des regards sont pluriels, et des regards permettent de nourrir, pas forcément d'avancer. Je pense que d'ailleurs, ce colloque va certainement nous montrer que la question du rapport à l'histoire, du rapport à notre contemporanéité et de toutes ces utopies modernistes sont depuis bien longtemps peut-être repensées et rebrassées justement à l'aune et au-delà de ce que est nommé comme étant la postmodernité. Je suis donc d'autant plus réjouie de vous accueillir parce que aussi le format d'un colloque est là aussi rythmé d'œuvres et de temps où on regarde des œuvres, où on les vit en direct, puisque comme vous le savez dans le programme il y aura une performance. Et ça nous permet aussi d'être vraiment en porosité avec le monde, avec ce que l'on produit et avec précisément toutes ces questions autour de la discussion, de l'interlocution, qui sont quand même des enjeux chers à Bernard Rudiger, qui donc est responsable de cette unité de recherche, donc Art Contemporain et Temps de l'histoire, et qui donc a apporté avec vous. Et je tiens donc à remercier ici donc Sami Khatib, philosophe, et qui est donc nous arrive directement, je ne sais pas si on peut dire directement, mais en tout cas enseignant à Karlsruhe. Albert Eta également, qui artiste et commissaire d'exposition, et vivant donc à Pristina et étant très impliqué dans la station et le centre d'art contemporain de la station. Merci aussi Chiara Palermo, philosophe, chercheuse, qui est venue aussi nous rejoindre. Je nomme aussi, qui n'est pas là, qui est loin de nous puisqu'elle est à Moscou, mais je sais qu'elle va intervenir en visioconférence, donc Katie Krukturov, j'ai un problème avec les noms, pardonnez-moi, qui donc devra intervenir, mais plutôt en visioconférence. Je voudrais aussi remercier évidemment l'ensemble des chercheuses et chercheurs, et évidemment Bernard Rudiger pour cette organisation, qui ont été plus qu'impliqués, partie totalement prenante de l'organisation de ce colloque. donc avec Sophie Lam, Marion Roche, Jennifer Loria Mariani, Michaela Julinkova, qui va d'ailleurs faire une performance cet après-midi, Anna Holweg, Lucas Zambon, Maxime Join qui va, je crois, nous rejoindre également. Voilà donc un bel ensemble. J'espère que je n'ai oublié personne. Et je voulais aussi évidemment remercier l'ensemble. Je le dis toujours parce qu'une organisation d'un colloque et d'un temps, c'est aussi toute une équipe qui est derrière. Et voilà, les remercier de tous les étages de la maison, parce que c'est vrai que c'est important. Voilà, dans ces temps où on est, il faut être ensemble pour construire. Donc, eh bien, merci. Et puis surtout, bon travaux, comme on dit. Hein, c'est comme ça qu'on dit. Bonne discussion. J'ai beaucoup aimé dans le programme le terme de discutant et discutante. Ça montre, je dirais, tout à fait, le fait qu'on énonce très clairement la notion de discussion et non pas de débat modérateur, qui est théoriquement un peu le terme d'usage, donc, où l'on modère. Donc là, vous allez discuter, si j'ai bien compris, et ça, c'est quand même très important. Voilà, merci. Je viendrai vous voir plutôt, je passerai dans l'après-midi. Malheureusement, je dois vous quitter. Mais voilà, on va se retrouver de toute façon, d'une manière ou d'une autre. Merci, je te laisse la parole. Alors, je fais en français, j'avoue.
Et moi, je me perds dans le langue.
Voilà, et toi, tu vas faire de l'allemand, du français et de l'anglais.
So, Sami, maybe you also join us? So then, thank you everyone to be there this morning, and thank you also to those who are looking through the YouTube chain to our debate. Thank you very much to be here, Albert and Sami. We propose now a little introduction to the topic of the conference. So maybe, Albert, I'll let you begin the introduction, please.
First of all, thank you for inviting us to be here. It's really always relevant for, at least for my practice, to come back. It's important to mention that Ensba is like the official partner of Summer School at School that we organized since 2015. And I'm always curious to see what is going on, especially in these times, challenged not only by the pandemic, but with everything else. And the conference itself, even though it was not planned to coincide with the actuality of the political reality that we are living in, it seems to be quite relevant for this specific moment where we are right now. Everything started basically out of my interest and curiosity, in a way, because currently my doctoral study deals with antagonism. It is somehow the theoretical vehicle in my research, more or less. And then I approached initially Sami to see if he would be interested to develop, let's say, an initial forum for discussion. And thus the first conference was conceived, basically, for the last edition of Summer School at School. Part of the panelists were with us online because of the pandemic situation. And then, as Bernard was in Pristina, of course, then this continuation of the discussion was also somehow proposed as an idea. Of course, I was happy to accept it, let's see, but then as we all are in very complex situations, it was not that easy to organize everything. So I hope this will still be just a small leap forward and not the end of this discussion. I will just say briefly something about the first conference and where we are right now. So the first conference somehow introduced, or we asked maybe, if in allegedly post-historical age negativity has become too negative to function. So basically this was the end of that short abstract of the whole conference. As I said, I mean, it was organized in another social and political reality, especially in the year where the last program was altogether cancelled. And I guess all art schools were in similar situations when having to reduce and adapt to the pandemic. But in the new context, with maybe I would be bold enough to see what was happening as the reenactment of a seemingly another imperial war in the borderlines of Europe. Any form of action, conflict or confrontation as organized resistance against what is going on, to me seems to be the only way to function now. Mm-hmm. So there's no more an alternative, right? So neutrality as such doesn't exist, or the idea of non-alignment or any other mode of functioning seems to be obliterated in this reality. I mean, it's still not clear if everyone in Europe is agitated by this real war happening in our borderlines. But this experience, or I'm inclined to see this experience as antagonistic, and which could open maybe the actual emergence of the political again. Because otherwise, populism, which was dominating this context, I think, I hope that it is going to see an end, because actual conflict is happening, and it's just the start of or the end of an era, basically. I would invite now Sami to reflect maybe on this moment where we are, and I'm once again happy to be here and to engage in this discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Albert, and thank you, Bernard, for inviting us. For me, it's the first time at Ensba, so I'm very pleased to be here. It's a long journey that brought us here. You mentioned already we had a Zoom conference over the summer when I didn't attend in person the Station summer school where I normally teach every summer, thanks to Albert. And I would like to say a couple of words how we came up with this very strange coupling. Contradiction, antagonism, negativity. Obviously, it reflects a bit our, let's say, theoretical, epistemological, political inclinations. While Albert chose, and you still choose, and I think it's still your PhD project, I'm not saying too much here, I hope, is based on the concept of antagonism. My intellectual trajectory is maybe more indebted to contradiction and negativity. So we could say that these are two entangled, but maybe not, but more or less also antagonistic intellectual genealogies in continental thought and in political philosophy. So as a handy formulation, I mean, antagonism, agonism, like a struggle or competition for something, and anti, like a fight of, if you want, political forces against each other, as a certain interpretation of what we might call with Marx class struggle. And in Marx you already have this idea of how to deal with a radical difference in class struggle. If you look at the genealogy of negativity and contradiction, of course you immediately are in the midst of the Hegelian and post-Hegelian discourse. So I would like to say a couple of words on that without annoy you with too much of history of philosophy, of course. But let's put it this way. Negativity as a kind of negative vitalism, as a force of history, as that which drives the whole machine of human history, as, you know, envisioned in a kind of theoretical hyperbolism of Hegel's philosophy, you know, war and suffering, mortality, the introduction of concepts or the thought of concepts in the world conceived as the stage, a world history of the fight of spirit becoming knowledge and science, and then absolute knowledge. Some of you remember the Hegelian concept, is driven by negativity. So negativity is something productive. It is something that keeps the whole thing in motion. And contradiction, which maybe already is a translation into like Widerspruch, no? Somebody says contra your diction, what you have said, is something you may say is not necessarily Hegelian, but you can say also in the Hegelian understanding of dialectics, something where in each and every diction, there's every saying, in every dictum, there's already a reflected part of its radical opposite. And this kind of reflection of the positive diction and its negative diction into itself is what drives the dialectics. So it's not like today's liberal optics would say, look, there are two perspectives, look at it from here, and this is dialectics. Of course, it's not dialectics. Dialectics is precisely to have one view that splits immediately into two, and this split is what drives dialectics, as you may say, a kind of a machine of both ontology and epistemology. Ontology as what is, and also of our modes of getting to know the world. And the outlet of that, let's say, or the material concretization of this machine, epistemo-ontological machine, is world history, of course. So you may say that's very old vintage Hegel, and I'm not doing justice here to Hegel, but if you take on Marx's interpretation, of course, you will immediately say, yes, negativity as force of history is another way of saying, of ending up with Marx's very catchy formula: the history of mankind can be reduced to one thing, class struggle. And class struggle is class antagonism, because class antagonism means there is a contradiction, which is not in dictio and speaking, but in political real forces. It is something that is unsublatable, something you cannot reconciliate. You cannot negotiate or sublate into a stable result, which would be, from a liberal point of view, liberal democracy. Everybody should have a say. We have a pluralistic society, and we end up with whatever the common good would be. No, it would be something that has to result in a kind of either struggle or defeat or abolishment of radical change. So as a handy formula, you can say antagonism is something of a reflected contradiction that doesn't translate into, as Hegelian vulgar dialectics has it, into a higher synthesis where the two negations are balanced, sublated, preserved and cancelled out. So it is a very, I think, productive, no, that's productive I shouldn't say, but it is an important political concept for class struggle, and Marx's adaptation, you may say, radical transformation of Hegelian dialectics. And now I come to antagonism. You maybe say something later tomorrow about this as well, but like Mao Zedong, for instance, saying that there is something like antagonistic contradiction where you cannot translate class struggle into a Hegelian machine of productive negativity where, you know, the contradictions will be weighted against each other and then somehow transform into socialism, but more almost a kind of existential crisis where only one force can be victorious and the other one has to be abolished. I mean, subplot to it would be there is a totalitarian undercurrent or even major current to this understanding of class struggle if you put it in a strictly Maoist sense. However, there's also another one, a cultural, psychoanalytical dimension to negativity, which we shouldn't miss here. You already have it in Hegel. Don't worry, I won't say too much, but...
I don't worry.
In Hegel, you already have this idea that negativity is also kind of the obstacle is that which produces the work of culture, the work of Bildung, of education and formation. So only by detour, by obstacle, by something that hinders the way of, let's say, our pursuit of happiness, our intentionalities, any work of culture or knowledge or whatever will be built. In Freud, you have a very similar understanding. You know the famous text, Civilization and its Discontents, I think in English, but Unbehagen in der Kultur, no, uneasiness, discontent in culture, that we have to oppress our drives, especially the death-driven drives, the less social drives, aggression and so on, death drive, in order to be able to sublate it into the work of culture. So again, negativity is the force. Negativity is something which is so negative, like death drive or aggression, that cannot have a proper place in social, in our social relations. So it has to be sublated, worked on, kind of sublimated into something else. You can say displaced to a different discourse, different to another scene, and there it can result in what would be the work of culture. You say the narrative is very similar, actually. There is a driving engine, which is negativity, which is you can never settle, you can never fully resolve. There's something that's going on, and it has a kind of opposite effect, which is the positivity of culture, the positivity of any kind of cultural edifice. So it's a very speculative figure, but you can say there is a kind of Hegelian, Freudian genealogy of conceiving of negativity. And I will end with, of course, where also you ended, or what is if this doesn't work? I mean, there was already in the 1930s, I think 37, Georges Bataille, who wrote this famous letter to his Hegel teacher, Alexandre Kojève, and said, sure, I understood dialectics, very interesting, but how about here, négativité sans emploi? Negativity without being employed or without employment. What if there is kind of an inert negativity, something unsublatable, kind of even amorph, that you cannot negate.
Employment, meaning you cannot do anything with it, right? Not employment.
Yeah, but also the point is, who is the one who can say to employ? For in Hegel, if you have negativity and you cannot employ it, your problem. World spirit is working anyways through you. If you are just an accidental avatar of world spirit and you have nothing productive to offer to turn negativity into something productive for yourself, sad for you, but at least I can tell you, you have contributed to the materialization, the material outlet, even as negation, of world spirit becoming absolute knowledge. You don't like this maybe, but at least you were part of the show. But what do you think happens then if there is some kind of inertia to negativity, which even on a world historical stage, a Hegelian world historical stage cannot be turned into a positive work of culture or Bildung. No? If there is something to negativity which is slightly off track, no? Which is kind of even have a swerve or something where in the scholastic understanding of Hegel, you know, you have thesis, antithesis, synthesis, of course, is not a nonsense, you know that, but still some people believe that this is how dialectic works. You know, there is a contradiction, okay, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and then you have a sublation word. It's nonsense, however, people believe in this. I'm just mentioning Bataille not to offer here a kind of conclusion, but just say there is already a history in the moment of historical crisis, think of 1937, 38 and so on, where there was an understanding or there were symptoms that this kind of Hegelian machine, Hegelian, let's call it Hegelian Marxian or vulgar Marxist Freudian machine of negativity is slightly off track, and even more off track than the positivist accounts that we were used to could accommodate. The positivist accounts at the time were the more socialist and social democratic ones. The liberals, of course, have always disavowed negativity altogether. They think they can manage that, micromanage it, and of course you know what that means. The neoliberal subjectivity is the failed result of the craziness of thinking you can micromanage negativity for yourself. I mean, you know your existence. But one more remark. So with Georges Bataille already we have an understanding of that there is something slightly off track. There could be negativity unsublatable, not put to employment. To work, anyway. Yes. And even then Jean-Luc Nancy had also this idea of a kind of désœuvrement, like an unworking in the midst of negativity as the driving force of dialectics. And you find, and I will end with this, you find another take on that, of course, in Benjamin, Dialectics at a Standstill. I won't say anything now, but if you think about Adorno and his post-Second World War philosophy, especially aesthetic theory, there's kind of still the last attempt, you can say, the last modernist attempt to have not a positive but a negative productivity. If you want a productivity, it would be wrong, or let's say a negative understanding of the result of social negativity meaning class antagonism, meaning capitalist social relations of production, something which is obviously negative, which is experienced as suffering and as exploitation, where in art, and especially in negative art, this kind of, let's call it unsublatable negativity of capitalist modernity could still be reflected. At least reflected, not be turned positive, but could be reflected in its very negativity. So art still has kind of a function. Maybe you know the bon mot of Adorno, the function of art is its very functionlessness. So of course it has no function, but it can still give an artistic presentation of social, political, historical negativity of capitalism. So this would be the last modernist attempt, I would say, to give a kind of, let's say, account of negativity, which somehow accommodates or not accommodates, we can discuss that, Georges Bataille's insight into there might be some kind of dark side of negativity that is not to be turned into a positive working of dialectics. And of course, you have parallel to this, and that's your discourse, of course, the understanding of antagonism and force fields in politics, which is a non-Hegelian.
To go to a small question, maybe this is becoming a debate, but what about negativity and the political, first of all? And also, I would not be so brave to say that art has no function in this story.
I don't understand this. I just I like him, but I'm not saying it.
Because, I mean, to go back, for instance, like Lau and Mouffe have passed the idea of class struggle in their work, and for them, antagonism is the space for confronting each other's arguments, and without antagonism, for them, there's only the imposed consensus of an authoritarian order. So, I mean, just to place it in this context, but also for me, not only because we are in an art context where we are right now, and we are talking about the impossibility of the art to have a certain role in this field. Maybe it's important to mention here the position of Olivier Maichard, who sees in art room for artistic rehearsals, test cases, and pre-enactments of political situations. So when the inability to have a political situation in political sphere, where do we turn? You know, where is that space where we can, let's say, regroup or think? And very often, historically, art spaces were used for these purposes, and as we are using it presently in this condition. But just because you're here, maybe if you can, because also they deal a lot with the political. You know, so for them, antagonism is the constitutive element of the political and the society as such. But I'm interested to hear more about negativity and the political. Also having in mind the idea that politics as the ontic existence has remained without the political in the given present conditions. And somehow antagonism has been seen as a way of repoliticization of politics as we have it, and where negativity here lies, even though, as you say, it has derailed or it's not maybe working as much in this context. And we have this, and you can see this also in some of the texts of the conference itself.
I give you a one-sentence answer, but a longer tomorrow. But I would like to give the word to Bernhard, because I built already the argument bridge along towards what then in art we have to do with negativity. But my short answer is, of course, negativity is working in politics, and you can call that antagonism. However, for me, there is no politics which is not at the same time a political economy. You know, I'm an old Marxist. And therefore, which was the problem of negativity was slightly off track, is for me an argument that negativity has been underestimated in the discourse of political economy. Certain vulgar Marxisms that we know, like the socialist fantasy of whatever, progression and betterment of society and so on, in an evolutionary sense, underestimated what negativity at work actually is. And I think Hegel was much closer to understanding that it's not about contradiction. Contradiction of arguments is on the battlefield. He was thinking of Napoleon, of course. So that is something of there's a lot to say about negativity as antagonism in politics. It is not dismissed. I think the question is even more radical now. Whether, in terms of how older conceptions of the political depoliticized politics precisely for underestimating what was the problem of negativity off track, or négativité sans emploi, is more radical than the negativity account that we found in these other concepts. But I wanted to give you the word, sorry.
No, thank you very much, because this discussion gives gives us opens up the field and the discussion and the antagonism of different positions. So I think it's really important. What we can say more precisely about art, so thank you very much for this, the quote of Bataille's problem, that is really maybe the last important step in this reflection on negativity. That's something that cannot be put to work, as you say. I think that there is maybe really a point that will come out of some of the interventions more tomorrow on this subject, on the possibility that this non-employment is the demand of another field, that is a demand to the place of politics in society, and to the format of how antagonism can play a role, open up by this possibility of non-employment. What does that mean to step back, to step out, to get to turn your back to something that should be an action, should be in act. So I think that there's an important thing, and also in the maybe to resume, I think that one of the problematics that are interesting for us, and maybe to make the point on this, a short point of the research unit, one of the important elements of our research unit is the belief that artworks cannot become examples for thinking, for politics, for whatever. That means that one of the great difficulties when you have to deal with works is that they are what they are. And this is a very complicated question, because to resume a little bit the field the sketch you made of the field of the discussion in art and negativity, to work out or to work through, durcharbeiten in Freudian terms, to work out something or to work through the body, let's say in Freudian terms, to work through yourself, working out what it is, what can be changed through negativity, or what negativity produced, is one of the great elements of art aesthetics. So this is something that in artworks and in the maybe also in the very beginning of an artwork, the reason to work is deeply, profoundly embedded in this idea that you have to make something out of negativity. But if we look at artworks, this could be only one level of the problem. Artworks being maybe also a paradigm of rethinking social antagonism in the artwork itself. So that when you have to deal with artworks, you have very often the problem that the artwork, you can take an element out of it, the paradigm of antagonism. Or you can see it as a field, as you said, as the floor on which the antagonism takes place, as a pre-enactment can take place as a pre-enactment of social conflict, so that this could be an aspect you can work out, but this Freudian element would also be present and still be in the echo of another part of this element, so that artworks can never become really an example of a philosophical thinking, of a theoretical approach. This is one of the elements I think is very important, so that one of the way we work in our research unit is that we go through the artworks, but they are never exposed to the theory as something that is clearly examined. The artwork remains something that is always not clearly in one position. So I think that this is also a very interesting approach of the problem of negativity and antagonism, or contradiction generally, that in the artwork itself there are several levels of historical social life, of political antagonism, of individual psychological resources that you cannot really explain one for what it is. It is always more than one. So I think that one of the skills of the also of bringing these thematics now to art more precisely in our discussion is also to get in the complexity of this question of the artworks. So maybe this is also the idea why we have performances that we will not discuss as such today. To come on to the program, there are the performance will be the performances. There are works. We will look at them. Then we will talk with the ones who make the performance. But we will talk starting from another work they did. This is a choice for us very important to maintain this complexity of the artworks and of the perception as an action. Because maybe the second level I think is important to mention in our problematic is that the singular perception and what you say in Hegelian terms, the fact that you are in contingency, someone who goes through and you are not responsible, is one of the interesting complex point of the question of negativity, because it has to deal with something very subjective that is really embedded in your own the being, your biological being, your psychological being, and your social being. And so that we also in this point are very linked to what in art we name perception, and that is one of the central elements of the artwork as such. So I think that after Adorno, I don't know what we could say about aesthetics nowadays. One point that seems to me important in this ineffective negative, the negativity that you cannot put to work, opens up another space of politics that maybe we had to look at seriously, coming maybe from art, the possibility to rethink what you said, being one of the great problems of post-socialist politics nowadays, or neoliberal socialistic mixture of redemption, that there is something in this radical negativity that has to be looked at with very serious, in very serious way. Also, I think let's come back what you said, Albert, on the political situation nowadays, that brings us really in a new, let's say in Europe, in this social liberal Europe brings us in a position where we have to think on antagonism also as an urgency that takes us to use the political floor. What do we do on political floor? That means what is action on political floor? How do we deal with war and with very brutal reality of antagonism? I think that I don't think that art can be put only in the position of something negative necessary. I think that this is also something that brings toward what the political play can no more do. So, I think, Albert, the floor is yours now.
Okay.
We will start this day, for the program.
I would just need to put something on that computer,
Yes.
but I forgot.
I give you a key.
Right.
So to the program today, I think the day will be more on this subjects on antagonism today, and tomorrow we will discuss more maybe this problematics of negativity with also Sami's. You didn't say nothing about Benjamin, so that you you will catch it for tomorrow. That is a very good thing. Albert, the floor